Inmates at a French prison make toy wooden horses at a long table. Emile, one of the prisoners, distracts a guard so his friend, Louis, can steal a hook-shaped tool. That night, the pair escape from their cell. Louis scales the inner wall of the facility using a rope tied to the hook. But Emile is spotted when he tries to follow. Emile throws the rope to Louis and tells him to run for it. Several guards chase Emile, while Louis climbs the outer wall. Panicked, Louis runs into a road and is hit by a bicyclist. He rides off on the man's bicycle and ends up winning a race. Later, he covers up his theft of a small shop by acting as though he was attacked by a thief while the proprietor was out of the room. Quote, "Starting as a poor record merchant, Louis is able to work his way up until he is the well-attired and well-mannered head of a business that makes phonographs. The factory is run with great efficiency and the workers, overseen by a strict foreman, toil on an assembly line in an environment reminiscent of the prison from which Louis escaped." Single quote. In a field behind the factory, Emile, apparently having been released from prison, wakes from a nap in the grass. The sun is shining and some flowers sing him a song. But then two policemen come by and arrest him for vagrancy. From his jail cell, he hears music and sees, in an apartment across the street, a woman who appears to be singing while she hangs flowers around a window. Not wanting to be incarcerated anymore, Emile tries to hang himself from the prison window. But the bars comes loose. So he escapes instead. Single quote. Finding himself below the flower-covered window, Emile pauses to listen to the song, which winds down and stops, revealing to him that it was being played on a phonograph. He turns and sees the woman, Jean, standing next to him on the street and goes to say hello. But her uncle kicks Emile and pulls her away. A shopkeeper laughs at Emile and the two argue, which distracts Jean's uncle just long enough for Jean to make a date with her boyfriend, Paul, before her uncle leads her off to work. Emile finds safety from the shopkeeper in a line that turns out to be for new recruits at Louis' factory. He is about to leave when he discovers Jean works there as a secretary. So he sticks around. On the assembly line, Emile soon falls behind and causes a disruption. Jean comes to the factory floor to escape the unwanted advances of the foreman and Emile goes to talk to her. She drops her handkerchief and leaves before he can give it back to her. As the foreman has entered to try to restore order, the assembly line is restarted and Emile is removed from his position. Jean's handkerchief gets thrown out a window. So Emile goes after it and winds up being chased by the foreman and a growing number of factory guards. But the chase stops abruptly when everyone stands at attention while Louis passes by. Louis acts as though he does not recognize Emile, though he still agrees to speak privately. In Louis' office, Louis pulls a gun on Emile and then offers him money to disappear without revealing how they know each other. Emile refuses to extort his friend and sees Jean out the window. He wants to go return her handkerchief. But Louis stops him, cutting Emile's wrist in the process. As Louis tends to the wound with his handkerchief, he recalls that he had done similarly during their jailbreak and their friendship is rekindled. Emile's reappearance helps to get Louis to relax. After a fancy dinner party is broken up, not so much by the waiter spilling dessert on the guests as by Emile and Louis laughing at the situation. The friends throw things at a huge portrait of Louis and get drunk. In the morning, first Emile, and then Louis, are spotted by a man who was in prison with them. When Emile interrupts a meeting, Louis is annoyed and says he cannot have Emile around the factory. but he softens when Emile says he wants to stay because he is in love. Louis looks up Jean's personnel file and discovers her uncle is an accountant at the factory. So he tells the man that his friend wants to marry Jean. Thrilled at the prospect of his niece marrying someone so close to wealth, the uncle arranges for Emile and Jean to have a date. But Jean is unhappy to be engaged to a man with whom she has exchanged only a few words. At his mansion, Louis is welcomed by a group of men, one of whom is the former inmate who had seen him that morning, who threatened to expose Louis' criminal past unless he agrees to share his status and fortune with them. Meanwhile, Emile and Jean, chaperoned by her uncle, sit in awkward silence at a dance hall. Paul watches disapprovingly before he leaves with his date. Jean follows them and ends up alone with Emile, who tries to kiss her. She gently extricates herself from his embrace and finds Paul, whose date has abandoned him due to his lack of interest in her. Emile wanders around and, finding Jean with Paul, realizes she already has a boyfriend. After the date, Emile longingly looks up at Jean's apartment window while she happily waves to Paul. He realizes he is right outside the jail from which he escaped just as some policemen ask him what he is doing. So he runs away. They chase him to the factory, where he finds Louis, who has locked the group of blackmailers in a vault and is cleaning out his safe before running away. Louis tells the policemen and security guards he has not seen anyone. But, unfortunately, Emile accidentally frees the blackmailers while he is looking for a hiding place. A chase ensues, during which the former inmate manages to get the case Louis loaded with money. Emile escapes, but all of the blackmailers are apprehended. Unbeknownst to anyone but the former inmate, the case full of money was left on the roof when he got caught. Although the police officers do not listen to the blackmailers when they say Louis is an escaped criminal, Louis knows it is only a matter of time before they do. Quote, "The next day, Louis speaks at the opening ceremony of a new factory that will be completely automated. He notices a policeman in the audience and announces he has finished his work at the phonograph company and gives his factories to the employees. The wind picks up and blows the money off the roof, and the crowd runs after it. Louis uses the distraction to sneak away from the police. Single quote. With the factory running itself. The workers, Jean and Paul among them, spend their days in leisure. Emile and Louis, however, are now singing for spare change and traveling on foot. When a fancy car drives by, reminding Louis of how he used to live, Emile kicks him in the butt and, happily, they head down the road together. Single quote.